because this was all about finance. They wanted that property.
It's about systems of injustice.
There was just an incredible and pointed theft of African American land during that time, and this is just one of them that was erased.
In the last 3 years, 5 black cemeteries have been found across Tampa Bay, and there's likely more. But for the communities around them, they were never really lost.
We used to go out in the cemetery and pick flowers. They were wild flowers, they call them phlox. And we would go through the graveyard and put them on those graves that didn't have flowers.
My name is James Borchek, and this is Hidden Histories, Florida's untold, overlooked, and underreported history. In this episode, we'll talk about lost cemeteries.
You know, I mean, it's like the history of Florida. We're all sitting on top of a dead body in some way, but
This is way more.
this is different. This is very, very different.
Just like it feels like you're digging in the present,
Yeah,
or like for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
Buried under public housing, Zion Cemetery was the first to make headlines. Initially reported by the Times, it was the first black cemetery in Tampa, and it opened in 1901. Archaeologists believe up to 1,000 people could still be buried there.
I never saw them pick up a casket. You know, we did see some bones. My cousin found a skull, and it had, gold teeth in it.
Eunive Massey grew up next to Zion Cemetery.
Behind the stores, there was a road. That's how the cemetery was divided from our yards.
By the mid-1930s, the headstones had all been removed, replaced by shops and a warehouse. Recognizing Zion was only the beginning of a regional reckoning.
Ground-penetrating radar has found at least 115 probable graves.
Hillsborough County Schools continues its search for a possible graveyard.
In Clearwater, there are searches for 2 other cemeteries underway.
After 5 days of digging, they found 25 graves.
Robert Young remembers funerals at the St. Matthew's Baptist Church Cemetery in Clearwater. He worked there as a funeral attendant when he was 12.
There was no pavement, so it was dirt roads that had been carved out, and you followed that to the different graves. Some of them had headstones, some had the temporary metal markers.
In 1954, the city charged the church over $1,200 for paving and $330 for sewer construction.
The church could no longer afford the taxes that were assessed on the cemetery and sold it with the idea that the people that were buried in the cemetery would be moved. Obviously, we can tell that that didn't happen, but in all that time, people have been saying that there's still cemetery out here. We believe we have our loved ones still out here. The city didn't listen, the city didn't hear, the city didn't care, one of the three.
By 1960, St. Matthew's Cemetery, like Zion, had been erased.
I remember Montgomery Ward being built on that property, and then the city of Clearwater used it for municipal services. Currently, the Frank Crumb is on that property. Nothing against progress, but let's make sure we be respectful as to how we make progress.
Rebecca O'Sullivan is one of the archaeologists investigating 3 of the 5 newly discovered cemeteries.
History has been erased, and Zion is an example of that. The historic sites that speak to the black community in Tampa and all across Florida, so many of those sites have been erased.
I bet that's like at rest.
For now, it seems local governments are no longer ignoring those voices. The Tampa Housing Authority wants to build a memorial park which celebrates Zion's history. And in St. Petersburg, radar is being used on Tropicana Field's parking lot in anticipation of future development.
Do we want to be a city that erases black history and treats our fellow residents with disrespect, or do we want to be a community that cares about the history and the lives of everyone that lives here?